The first mistake I made was telling Bryn Calder that escape rooms were basically just glorified padlocks. Not out of cruelty, out of that specific kind of overconfidence that only shows up when you're trying to look unbothered in front of someone who already bothers you too much. She was standing at the snack table during our company all hands, holding a paper plate with exactly 2 grapes and a cracker, scrolling through something on her phone with the focused expression she used when a design wasn't working. I said it to break the silence. She looked up. Her eyes were the kind of gray-green that shifts depending on what she's wearing. And that day, she had on a dark green blazer, which meant they were reading more green than gray, which meant I lost track of what I was actually saying for half a second before I pulled it back together. Glorified padlocks, she repeated. The clues are basically telegraphed. I've done 4 of them. Never took longer than 35 minutes. She put her phone away, slowly, the way someone does when they've decided to give you their full attention, and you're not yet sure whether that's good news or bad news. Our team-building retreat is an escape room, she said. I knew this. I had registered 2 weeks ago. I said it anyway because I'm an idiot. I know. And you're coming. Obviously. Bryn tilted her head. One side of her mouth lifted just slightly, like something small and deliberate was waking up behind it. Okay, she said. Then she picked up her paper plate and walked away. That was a Tuesday. The retreat was the following Friday. In those 8 days, I thought about that look more than I thought about the quarterly cohort report I was supposed to be finishing. My name is Gabe. I was 26 when this happened, a data analyst at a product company called Arcfield Solutions, which made enterprise software for mid-sized logistics companies and was headquartered in a glass building in Austin, Texas that had a rooftop deck nobody used because it faced west, and Texas in October still felt like a punishment. Bryn Calder was the UX lead, 28 years old, and had been at the company 8 months before I arrived, which meant that when I showed up, everyone already knew who she was, and when she walked into a room, the kind of attention she got was the kind that had already been earned. I noticed her because you couldn't not. She had this way of sitting in meetings, never leaning back, always slightly forward, like she was 2 steps ahead of whatever was being said and deciding whether it was worth her time to redirect it. I'd watched her dismantle a product roadmap once by asking 3 quiet questions in a row, each one a little more precise than the last, until the guy presenting had to admit his entire timeline was built on assumptions he hadn't validated. She didn't gloat. That was the worst part. She just nodded and said, "Let's figure out what we actually know," and moved on like she hadn't just surgically removed someone's confidence in front of 12 people. I thought about her constantly and spent considerable energy pretending that I didn't. We'd worked together on 2 projects. In that time, she had caught an error in one of my data models before I sent it to a client, borrowed my phone charger, and returned it the same day with a sticky note that said, "Thanks, Gabe, this one actually has output," and once sent me a Slack message at 10:45 p.m. That read only, "Do you think the conversion funnel visualization is lying to us?" I said yes. We stayed on Slack until midnight figuring out why. Neither of us mentioned it the next day. Dating coworkers was not something I had a rule against. I just had a rule against doing it with someone who sat 12 feet away from me and could end a meeting with a look. That kind of proximity required a margin of error I did not have. So I stayed professional, competitive, if I'm being honest. I started double-checking my analyses before sending them her way. I started reading more about UX just to hold my own in conversations. One time she referenced a cognitive load study in a meeting, and I went home and read the full paper, 42 pages, and then cited a specific finding from page 31 the following week. She paused mid-sentence and looked at me like I'd shown her something unexpected. That 30-second look cost me 3 nights of sleep. Anyway, the escape room. Our company had booked out a place called The Vault in South Austin, one of those warehouse spots with exposed brick walls and 4 separate rooms running simultaneously. 17 of us piled into the lobby on a Friday at 5, already loosened up by the fact that it was Friday and nobody had to go anywhere they didn't choose. Our manager, Cliff, was the kind of person who genuinely believed team-building activities built teams, So he'd organized the whole thing with the same energy he put into quarterly planning, color-coded name tags, a sign-up sheet for room preferences, and a group photo in front of the logo wall before anyone could object. Bryn arrived in dark jeans and a rust-colored pullover, hair pulled back, hands wrapped around an iced coffee she'd clearly picked up on the way over. She walked in, found me across the lobby. I noticed that, and raised her cup in my direction. "The padlock expert," she said, setting her bag down next to mine. "I stand by my assessment." "Good. Then you won't mind being on the opposing team." She smiled and turned to help Cliff sort out the room assignments. Opposing team, of course. The vault split us into groups of 4. My team was me, a guy from marketing named Quam, our IT manager Doris, who turned out to be alarmingly good at puzzles, and a late-staying intern named Bo, who was on his phone until the door locked and then became inexplicably useful. Bryn's team was Bryn, Todd from product, and 2 people from client success. The setup was straightforward. Whoever escaped first got bragging rights and, per Cliff's announcement, a $50 gift card to the restaurant next door. Bryn's room started 2 minutes before ours, which she pointed out to me in the lobby, with the level of satisfaction usually reserved for winning actual arguments. "Head start," she said. "That's how you want to play it." She looked at me over the rim of her cup. "If my team gets out first," she said, "you owe me dinner." The lobby was loud. 8 people talking, 2 staff members giving instructions, Cliff photographing everything. Nobody else heard this, just me. I looked at her. "With what prize money?" "Not the gift card, a real dinner, somewhere that takes reservations." I should have laughed it off. I should have said something like, "In your dreams, Calder," and left it exactly there. Instead, my brain did a quick and completely dishonest calculation where it decided that losing this particular bet would not actually be losing. "Call your room," I said. She tapped the door to her right. "Room B, 40 minutes or less." "We'll be out in 30. We were not. We were out in 34 minutes. Doris cracked the final cipher with the same calm expression she used when resetting passwords. We pushed through the exit into the lobby, running on that particular adrenaline that comes from doing something that felt ridiculous and was somehow satisfying, and found the lobby empty of Bryn's team, which meant either they were still inside their room or they'd already finished. Then the door to room B opened. Bryn walked out first. She wasn't running. She didn't need to. She came through the doorway at her regular pace and found me standing there, and the math of what that meant passed between us without anyone saying a word. 32 minutes, the staff member said, reading from a tablet. I stared at him. "That's 2 minutes faster," Bryn said. She picked up her iced coffee from the bench where she'd left it. "I called the hidden panel in the back wall at minute 8. Todd kept insisting it was structural." She glanced at me. It wasn't structural. Behind her, Todd from product looked like a man who had believed something strongly and been wrong about it and was still running the numbers. "Dinner," Bryn said. Not a question. "Dinner," I said. She nodded once, satisfied in a way that was completely maddening, and went to find Cliff for another photo. For the next 2 hours, we were 17 coworkers being deliberately normal at the rooftop bar. Cliff had booked for the post-event portion of the evening. Austin in October had gone from brutal to bearable. That specific window, when the heat finally gives up and the city feels like a different version of itself. The bar had string lights and a cocktail menu and a view of the skyline, and everyone was looser now. Kwame was explaining to someone that he'd majored in theater, which explained a great deal about his presentation style. Cliff was telling anyone who would listen that team building worked. I was at the railing with a beer, not specifically looking for Bryn, when she appeared beside me. "You let Doris do all the work," she said. Doris wanted to do the work. I provided moral support. "You were looking at the wrong panel for 6 solid minutes." I was gathering data. She leaned her forearms on the rail. The city lights caught the side of her face. "I've done 7 escape rooms," she said. "My record is 21 minutes. I looked at her. "You let me think you were casual about it." "You assumed I was. I didn't say anything to correct you." That tracked. I had dismissed escape rooms. She had said nothing and waited 8 days for the evidence to arrive. That was deliberate, I said. That was efficient. She glanced sideways at me. I don't bet on things I'm not confident about. I turned that sentence over carefully. She hadn't made the bet on a whim. She'd thought about it before she walked through the door. She'd come in knowing. Why dinner? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. The bar moved around us with other people's noise. Somewhere nearby, Cliff was describing his bracket system to someone who clearly hadn't asked. Because you always eat lunch at your desk, she said. And I wanted to see what you were like when you weren't performing. That one landed differently than I expected. I'd spent 8 months thinking I was doing a solid job of being normal around her. Apparently I was performing. Apparently she'd seen the performance clearly enough to want the version underneath it. You could have just asked, I said. I could have, she agreed. But this was more interesting. I had no answer for that whatsoever. Later, I was near the side of the bar, talking to Kwame about something I can't now remember, because Bryn was across the room making a point with her hands the way she did when she actually cared about something. And I was tracking it without meaning to. Then I heard Todd. He was 3 feet away, phone angled toward where Bryn and I had been standing at the rail 20 minutes earlier. The flash was off. But I recognized the posture, the careful angle, the slight turn away. He'd already taken something. Maybe more than one thing. He saw me see him. He smiled the way people do when they're not certain they've done something wrong and are betting it won't matter. Just capturing the vibe, he said. Good night, right? I looked at his phone and thought about the angle. Then I said quietly, delete whatever you have. He blinked. Relax, man. It's just the atmosphere. If it's just atmosphere, it's easy to delete. He made a show of tapping the screen. I didn't see what he actually pressed. I made a note of that. I didn't say anything to Bryn that night. The evening wound down. Cliff gave a speech about synergy. The gift card was presented. A group migrated to a different bar. Most of us didn't. Bryn found me near the elevator bank at the end of the night, coat over her arm, and said, "We never set a date." "Thursday," I said, immediately, with no pretense of thinking about it. She tilted her head. "So am I." The elevator arrived. We went to separate cars and I drove home feeling the specific way you feel when something you've been pretending not to want has started moving on its own. The problem arrived Monday morning at 8:52 a.m. I know because I'd just made my second coffee and opened a cohort analysis that was supposed to be clean and wasn't. Then my Slack notifications started going off. 1, then 2, then 4 in under a minute. The Yes General channel. Todd had posted a clip. Not from the rail, earlier from a different angle, in the escape room lobby before the rooms opened. 8 seconds. Me looking at Bryn while she talked. The specific look of a person who thinks he's being subtle and is not even close. The caption said, "Friendly competition or something else? Talisfairy Friday vibes at the vault." There were laughing face reactions before I finished reading. I sat with that for exactly long enough to understand what it was. Then I opened a DM to Bryn. She'd already seen it. She replied in one line, "I need a minute." I gave her 10. Then I walked to the kitchen and found her at the counter, mug in both hands, staring at the backsplash with the expression she used when a problem had several wrong answers. And she was sorting through all of them. "Hey," I said. She looked up. Her face was composed, but the kind of composed that takes effort, built deliberately to replace whatever the real version would show. "I'm not upset about the content," she said. "I'm upset about the choice to make me content." I know. He didn't ask. He posted it in a company-wide channel with a caption. I know. I told him Friday to delete what he had. I think he had more than one clip. She wrapped her hands tighter around the mug. How long do you think people have been reading into this? It wasn't really a question. We both understood that 8 months of carefully maintained professional behavior could be retrospectively reframed in the light of one 8-second clip. That's just how it works. People collect data points quietly and wait for a frame to put around them. "Bryn," I said. She looked at me. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you Friday. I thought I'd handled it." She studied me for a moment. "You told him to delete it." "He pretended to." Something settled in her face. Not softer, more resolved. She put her mug down. Okay, she said, then I know what to do. She sent a message to HR before 9. I know because at 10:15, Todd was included on an email from Janine in People Operations requesting a conversation about appropriate use of company communication channels and employee consent. Janine also CC'd me and Bryn. The conversation happened in the small glass-walled conference room at 11. I sat on one side, Bryn beside me, Todd across from us, looking like a person who had posted what he thought was a harmless joke and was now learning the full definition of harmless. Janine wore square tortoise-shell glasses and had the specific energy of someone who has worked HR at a growing startup long enough to have seen everything and stopped being surprised by any of it. This was posted in general, she said, pulling up the clip on her laptop. A company-wide channel. It was a fun clip, Todd started. Nobody really. I'm not asking whether anyone complained, Janine said. I'm asking whether you obtained consent from the people in the video before posting it in a professional channel. Todd opened his mouth, closed it. Bryn spoke quietly. I've been at this company 2 years. I've never had my professionalism questioned. She looked at Todd directly. That video didn't show anything wrong. But posting it with that caption in a work channel turned something private into office speculation. That's not a small thing. That's my reputation being turned into a laugh react. Todd looked at the table. Janine delivered the outcome evenly. The post would come down. Todd would receive a formal reminder about media policy, and Bryn and I should review the relationship disclosure guidelines if things were ongoing. Ongoing, that word again. Todd deleted the post. The meeting ended. In the hallway, the office did its best impression of a place where no one had been watching the glass walls the entire time. It was not convincing. Bryn and I stood in the hall. She exhaled slowly, then looked at me with something I couldn't quite name. Not anger, not relief, something in the space between them. That was necessary, she said. Yeah. I hate that it was necessary. I know. She glanced toward her desk. We still have Thursday. If you still want it. Gabe. She said my name with exactly the patience she used when I'd gotten an analysis wrong, not unkind, just clear. I planned that bet 8 days in advance. One clip on Slack doesn't change why I made it. We went back to our desks and spent the rest of the afternoon being extremely professional in the way that only becomes natural once certain things have been said out loud. Thursday came. I got to the restaurant 11 minutes early, which I am not going to apologize for. The place was called Birch and Salt, Eastside Austin. Nice without being performatively nice, with a seasonal menu and tables spaced far enough apart that you could have a real conversation. Bryn arrived in a navy dress, her hair down, which she never wore at the office. The silver watch she always had on was there. I'd noticed it for 8 months. I noticed it now. She sat down across from me, looked at the menu for 4 seconds, and set it down. I have something to tell you, she said. Okay. 3 weeks ago, I was offered a senior design director position. Different company, Seattle. It was a significant offer. She held my gaze. I turned it down last week, before I made the bet. I stayed very still. Why? Several reasons. She folded her hands on the table. The work here is at a genuinely interesting point. Austin fits me. I have a good team. She paused, and I was tired of treating reasons to stay like they needed to be defended. The restaurant moved around us. Someone laughed at the next table over. I was sitting across from a woman who had made a decision before she ever walked into that escape room lobby, and the decision hadn't been about the $50 gift card. I've been doing something similar, I said, in reverse. I know, she said, simply without explaining how. Which meant she'd seen it clearly enough that explanation felt redundant. We ordered, we ate. We argued about 2 things on the menu in the exact way that made it clear we'd been having low-grade arguments for 8 months and had gotten very good at them. She told me about growing up in Oregon with parents who were both teachers and thought design was a polished way of saying art class, until she showed them what a well-built user experience could do to a company's revenue numbers. I told her about Ohio, about studying statistics, because I liked finding patterns in things, and then spending my first year after graduation wondering why the patterns I was finding felt like the wrong ones. What were the right ones? She asked. People, I said. Why people do what they do with products. What breaks and what holds. Which is, I realized too late, basically your entire job. She looked at me across the table. How long did that take you to figure out? 8 months, I said. She laughed. The real one, warm and slightly surprised, the kind that escapes before she's edited it. I had been working toward that laugh for 8 months without ever admitting it to myself. After dinner, we ended up on the river trail, not because we planned it, just because neither of us was ready to stop talking, and the air was exactly right. October in Austin, after the heat finally breaks, is a different city, lighter, like it's been holding its breath since March, and just let it go. I need you to understand something, Bryn said at some point, when we'd slowed near a bend where the city lights shimmered on the water. Okay. The bet wasn't only about finding out what you're like away from the office. She looked forward, the way she looked at problems she was thinking through carefully. It was also about finding out if you'd take it seriously. The bet. The dinner, both. I thought about that. And, she turned, you got there 11 minutes early. That could just be punctuality. You read a 42-page cognitive load study because I mentioned a model in a meeting. She said it without drama, like a fact she'd simply decided to stop not saying out loud. Gabe, you have been paying attention to me for 8 months. The only thing I was waiting for was evidence that you'd admit it. I should have said something clever. I meant to. Instead, I reached for her hand, not dramatically, just the way you do when something is true and you're done pretending otherwise. And she looked down at our hands, then back up at me, and I kissed her there on the river trail, with Austin moving quietly around us, and someone's dog trotting past without a second glance. She pulled back after a moment, smiling. What? I said. Nothing. I thought it would take you longer. I'm growing. She held onto my hand and we kept walking. On the way back, she told me she'd already pulled up Arkfield's disclosure policy. She had a draft email sitting in her drafts folder. She'd written it 6 days ago. Before the escape room. Before the lobby. Before the bet. I stopped walking. She looked back at me. Trail lights caught half her face. You wrote the disclosure email 6 days ago, I said. I told you, I don't bet on things I'm not confident about. She tilted her head. I'm methodical. I laughed so hard a couple on a nearby bench turned to look. Bryn tugged me forward. Monday morning, she sent the disclosure email and CC'd me. Janine replied within the hour, thank you for handling this proactively. Todd stayed quiet for 2 weeks and then gradually resumed being himself, which was fine. Kwame brought the whole thing up exactly once, said, I knew at the all hands for the record, and then let it go, which was the right move and the reason Kwame was good at what he did. Bryn and I started eating lunch together on Tuesdays. Not something we planned. It happened 3 weeks in a row and quietly became the arrangement. She sent me design questions before 10 p.m. I sent her data visualizations before client presentations, not because I needed sign-off, but because she always found the thing I'd made slightly wrong. Your axis labels are apologizing, she said one afternoon, looking at a dashboard I'd built. Apologizing. They're too small. They're not committing to being read. She adjusted them in about 90 seconds and handed my laptop back. There. The dashboard did, objectively, look better. I could have done that, I said. You could have, she agreed, but you sent it to me. 6 months later, she was promoted to head of design. It was not because she was with me. It was because she had redesigned the onboarding flow for Arkfield's flagship product and reduced new user drop-off by 31%, which I know because I ran the cohort analysis, and even I had to look at those numbers twice before I sent them to Cliff. That fall, we moved into a place near Zilker Park, good light, a small back porch, a kitchen with enough counter space that we didn't have to negotiate. She brought her drafting table. I brought a large monitor she immediately described as aesthetically unfortunate and then started using for her own work whenever I wasn't at my desk. We bought a rug we disagreed about for 6 days, and then both agreed looked exactly right once it was down. Janine from HR sent a card. A year after the escape room, we went back to the vault on a Friday in October. Different group, just the two of us, plus Kwame and his girlfriend, doing a room because it was the anniversary. And Bryn thought it was funny, and I had learned not to underestimate what Bryn thought was funny. We got to the final puzzle first. Bryn was crouched in front of a combination lock, running through sequences with the same focused expression she used when a design wasn't resolving. I waited until she was one attempt away. Bryn. She looked up. "If you open that lock," I said, "you owe me forever." She stared at me. I was holding a ring that had been in my jacket pocket for 11 days, waiting for the right moment, which turned out to be an escape room in South Austin on a Tuesday evening in October. For 3 full seconds, she didn't move. Then she turned back to the lock, entered the last sequence, and heard it click. She stood. She faced me. Her eyes were bright in a way I'd never seen before, and her jaw was working like she was trying to find the right sentence and couldn't land on it. "Well," I said. "You are," she said, "the most methodical person I have ever." And then she stopped saying words entirely and said yes. Kwame yelled so loudly the game master knocked on the door to check on us. We got married the following spring, outside, because Bryn said she didn't want a ceiling on a day she'd been looking forward to breathing freely at. The ceremony was short and the dinner was long, and Kwame's toast referenced the escape room and the concept of hidden panels and Bryn's ability to locate the right entry point in any complex system, which made her laugh the real laugh, the one that comes out warm and slightly surprised. Todd was not invited. He sent a gracious LinkedIn message. I read it once. Janine from HR came. She said she hadn't expected to be. Bryn told her she'd written the disclosure email specifically to give Janine as little headache as possible, so it felt right to thank her in person. Janine looked genuinely moved, which was something I hadn't known Janine was capable of, and that felt like a small private victory on top of a very good day. People ask sometimes whether dating someone at work was complicated, whether we'd do it the same way again, whether the risk was worth it. The honest answer is that it was the most complicated thing I've ever navigated, and also the clearest decision I've ever made, and somehow both of those things were true at the exact same time, all the way through. But mostly what I think about is a lobby in South Austin. A woman in a rust-colored pullover with an iced coffee. The look she gave me after I said, escape rooms were nothing but glorified padlocks. Patient, faintly amused, waiting for me to catch up to something she'd already figured out. She was always 2 steps ahead. I spent 4 years proving I was worth keeping pace with. Last week she left a sticky note on my monitor. All it said was, "Still 2 steps ahead. Catch up." I kept it in my desk drawer, obviously.